All right, guys, I want to welcome everybody to another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I am so very pleased to have my head coach, Coach Watson Brown, with us this evening. Thank you, Coach, for making some time and spending a little time with us this evening. I hope you're doing well.
Bernard, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. You and I've already had some great conversations, so it's been neat. I'm not a Facebook, Twitter guy, so as a bunch of my UAB guys got on me about today, but so it's neat like this to be able to hear you talk about some of our guys, and hopefully some of them will be around tonight.
Well, I certainly hope so, and it usually takes a couple of minutes for them to roll in, but we'll have some folks. Well, here's the first one. JJ. June Jakes has joined us. Good evening, Miss Jakes. Good to see you. She's always here and is always a big supporter of what we're doing here, and I know you know her well.
I love her. Absolutely love her. Great lady. JJ and Beverly, how could we do without both of them? Huh?
That's right. Well, Coach, before we go back in the Wayback Machine, for folks who haven't talked to you of late or hadn't seen you, tell everybody what you're up to these days.
Well, Bernard, I retired, I guess, I can't announce them, maybe 4 years ago, I guess, 3 to 4 years ago. Went to work for ESPN, was an analyst for 3 years, stayed around football a little bit, helped the high school here in town, and would go out and help them a little bit and coach the quarterbacks for them or receivers a little. And so I stayed around football that way. Stopped the ESPN stuff a year ago, and I've been doing a call-in show with George Plaster. Everybody remembers George from Nashville. George and I do a daily call-in show out of Nashville on WNSR. And if you don't live in Nashville, you can't get it, but there's an app that you can get on WNSR, and you can hear it every day. So love to have the guys get on and call in or listen to that. We have a lot of fun on that show.
I've been listening to it the last couple of months on the internet, and you guys do have a lot of fun. If there's anything that's fun, it's that show, that's for sure. A lot of laughs.
Well, George is a clown anyway, and he's good. Tell Gary I said hello. I don't see him enough. Great friend, great coach.
And James Manley, or Vanessa, his wife, has joined us. Hey, James or Vanessa, good to see you guys. And Dwayne Jones, equipment man extraordinaire and man on the cords extraordinaire, has joined us.
My number one cord man ever. Dwayne Jones would be number one. I had a young man named Brad Frazier at Mississippi State that I would put there with. Huh?
I know you finished up at Tennessee Tech in 2015, I believe. What was it toward the end of your career that made you decide it was time to get off the sidelines and just enjoy what you had done? What led to that?
Bernard, I've always said I've never worked a day in my life. It was never a job to me. And I felt there toward the end, the long bus trips, it was becoming more of a job. It was getting like when we would win a game, it was more relief and then have to prepare for the next one. And it just, and people always said to me, you're going to know when it's time. And I was 66 at that point and have enjoyed being out. I think I've been smart and kept myself around football. I think I've weaned myself slowly from it. Being an analyst for those 3 years, I was able to stay in the X's and O's and all of that close, and always enjoyed that anyway, especially on the offensive side. So it's been fun. We live out on a 13-acre. My dad in heaven is laughing at me now. Believe me, he never thought I'd be a farmer. I can tell you that. But my wife has 2 cows and a miniature donkey, so we have a blast. And I cut a little too much grass, but other than that, we've had fun. We were in the cities like Nashville, Birmingham, Houston, Cincinnati. We'd always lived in the city, so it's been neat to have a little property out. We've never had this
Well, Coach, growing up in Cookeville, I know you played all the sports there were to play, just depending on the season. And I don't know how many folks understand or excuse me, knew that you were actually drafted by the Pirates coming out of high school. So which sport was your favorite sport as a kid before you came on to college?
You know, Bernard, it was the Pirates that were going to draft me out of college. It was the Red Sox that were going to draft me out of high school. But what
I'm
they
sorry.
told me is they said you'll be somewhere in the first 3 rounds, and they were going to give me some cash, which was in those days good. But in those days, Bernard, you could not play any sport if you didn't make it. If you went to baseball as a professional, you couldn't come back and play football. They said they'd draft me if I didn't sign a scholarship in football. In February, the draft was in May at that point. And I just told them I couldn't do it. And probably one of those regrets that has eaten at me for a long time. I would say my favorite sport was baseball, even though I love football. I played basketball too, but I would say baseball was my favorite sport. And but I couldn't do it at 17 years old then and take that chance not to get a degree and not make it. You know, drafted in baseball is a different world than drafted in football. And you've got to make it through all the systems. And they were going to send me the rookie league up in Maine somewhere. And it was just a little too much for me. And I ended up going on and signing with Vanderbilt in football.
Well, Coach, what was it about Vanderbilt? I'm sure you had other schools that were interested in you. You may have been interested in other schools, but what was it that drew you to ultimately sign with Vanderbilt?
You know, Bernard, what I think, and I've thought about that many times, I committed to Alabama and then backed out and went to Vanderbilt. And in those days, it's not like today. When you committed in those days, nobody really knew it. And there was a lot of big hoopla when you signed, but not when you committed. And I backed out really about 10 days before signing date. And I just think there was this feeling that we could do it. We could get it done there. And Alabama, I think my wife has said this to me for my life. She says, you're just an underdog. You always take these underdog places and want to prove you can do it. And I think that was the first time I did that and fell in love with coaches. I love Coach Pace. I love my coach. And we lost Coach Pace many years ago. But even after I quit playing, I stayed very close to him, and he was a very good man. So I haven't regretted it. Vanderbilt was good to me, and a lot of good things happened with me there. So good Lord sends us different ways, and haven't regretted it. Like I said, but a lot of people said, did you regret not going to Alabama? I said, no, I'm not going to go there, but the baseball piece has eaten at me for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Coach, did you ever have to have that conversation with Coach Bryant or one of his assistants to let them know that you weren't coming to Tuscaloosa, that you had changed your mind?
Oh, I've told that story 1,000 times. I told my dad, my dad was a Tennessee fan, and it wasn't going there. And when I committed to Alabama, that was fine. But when I said I was going to back out, my dad said, no, you're not going to call him on the phone. We're driving down there, and you're going to go in the office and tell him face to face.
Wow.
So that's what happened. And it's a great story, and I've been close to Coach Bryant till he passed. And I can tell you why. I sit there with him and told him, most nervous I've ever been in my life. And he said, Watson, that's fine. If you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. It's best for you to go on, but let me tell you what's going to happen. You're not around very good players right now. You'll play well, but you will not finish. You will end up getting injured. And we beat him as a sophomore and ended up getting injured in my junior year, never played again. So that happened exactly like the man said. When we beat him, Bernard, before the game, we beat him in Nashville as a sophomore. And before the game, he used to walk the sidelines and go to the far end and stand by the goalpost. That was his deal. we were throwing on the sidelines in old Dudley, the old track. You wouldn't, this is way earlier than you guys, but there was a track around Dudley Field then. And he was walking right beside the track. And as he walked by me, he said, "You can't throw now. You couldn't throw when I recruited you. You can't throw now and you'll never be able to throw." And kept walking. And I didn't know if he was cutting up or he was telling me what he was doing. But after we beat him, of course, it was melee back then. That was a huge upset. And he found me in that crowd, gave me a big hug, and walked off the field. And every job I got, Bernard, after that, when I went into coaching, Coach Bryant got me till he passed away. So he took care of me for some reason. And my first job was at East Carolina with Pat Dye, who was an assistant on his staff, and hired me at 24 years old. And I'm gone and been coached ever since. And so I've just thought the world of the man. And I've told this story for a lot of reasons, but the main reason I tell it, it tells what kind of guy he was. He cared about people. He cared about players. I wasn't one of his and turned him down. And yet he took care of me all the way through. The great story was in '82 when we went to the Birmingham Bowl, and I was offensive coordinator at Vanderbilt. And we had the great year. I was interviewing for the head coaching job at West Point. And I get a phone call in my room on the campus of West Point as I'm getting ready to head back to Nashville. And it's Ray Perkins. And Ray has just taken the Alabama job. And he said, "Would you come by Meadowlands here and talk with him?" So I stopped on the way before I went to the airport, ended up spending the night and ate supper with him. He offers me the offensive coordinator's job. And I said, "Ray, you don't even know me. Why would you do that?" And he said, "Coach Bryant said hire you." And I ended up going as head coach to Cincinnati, and then 2 years later ended up back at Vanderbilt. But the man just took care of me. Of course, Coach Bryant passed away about 6 months after that. And just think the world of him. It's unbelievable that he would do that for a guy that turned him down and didn't play for him.
Well, he was clearly quite fond of you. And it's interesting, the story that you tell. Kirk Page was on the show a few weeks ago, and you may or may not know that he had initially had committed to Alabama and had a very similar conversation with Coach Bryant to let him know that he had changed his mind and was coming to Vanderbilt. So I'm sure many nervous conversations were had by 17 and 18-year-old commitments who had changed their mind over the years.
Oh, it happened. Nowadays, it's even harder because these kids are followed daily. And if you commit somewhere now, they know it immediately. It's just a different world than it was then. Of course, I signed Kurt as an assistant coach, and Kurt was on our team, was the backup to Whit Taylor for a year before. That's when I left to go to Cincinnati, and then Kurt had a really good career after I left.
Yeah, he really, really did. But where I want to pick up in your career, Coach, is 79 and 80 when you're at Austin Peay. You had been at Texas Tech right before that, and came to Austin Peay. Now, the staff that came on to Vanderbilt in 81, 82, was that a set staff with Coach McIntyre, or was that a new staff when you came in 81?
No, it was a set staff.
We've got a low connection.
A lot of great guys were there. It was a good staff. I really enjoyed working with those guys. And Coach, you lost me? Bernard.
I'm here, Coach. I'm here.
Bernard.
Yes, sir. You came in, and I heard you came in 81 as offensive coordinator.
You're okay.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah, I was the head coach at Austin
Tell us,
Peay,
Coach, about that.
Had recruited Kurt
81 and 82
to Austin Peay, and he didn't come. And then I went to Vanderbilt. Yeah, it was fantastic. Coach Mack was a great man, really good to me, just let me go. Really a fun man to work for. And we had two good teams. The record wasn't great the first year, but it was a good team. And it got better and better. And then the next year we went to the first bowl in a long, long time. And Whit Taylor was a great player. Norman Jordan was a great player. Alama Matthews, names that people don't probably remember.
Norman
I do.
Jordan, Keith Edwards, Louis Stevenson.
Keith Edwards was
Jeff
a great player.
Holt.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're a really good football team. Defense was, we broke a lot of records on offense, 56 of them, I think. But our defense really didn't get the credit that I thought they deserved. It was a very good defensive football team. Got a lot of turnovers. We had a lot of great field positions that year. And one of the most fun years of my career. And all those guys, there's a lot of our guys that when I was head coach, Bernard, and so successful today. That's what's neat. I mean, I was talking to a buddy the other day, and I think I've coached nearly 4,000 athletes as a head coach.
Wow.
And it's
that's
between
phenomenal.
3,500 and 4,000 in my 32 years. And the neat thing through all of that, all of them, I'd say 99% great kids and winners. And I've watched them grow up now, and I coach some of them's kids. And it's so neat to see the successful kids, as in your group, in your class. And just, it's amazing to see how successful so many of these football players that I was lucky enough to coach have been at 6 different universities.
Well, Coach, you after the '82 season, you leave Vanderbilt as the OC, but then you head up to Cincinnati. You're there for a year or two. Then you head over to Rice, and then talk to us about leaving Rice and then coming back to Vanderbilt, but this time you're the head coach.
Yeah,
Coach, were you
I
able to
don't
hear
know
me
that
okay?
I would have done it. It was a tough time. Yeah, I got you. You got me?
Yes, sir.
You got me, Bernard?
I do.
Okay.
Go ahead. Tell us about coming to
It
Vanderbilt.
was a tough time and a tough decision. Okay, as I said, it was a tough time to come. They just had this big steroid incident at the university, and I don't think I would have done it at that point. I really liked it. My family loved Houston, but it's Coach Kramer. So close to Coach Kramer, and he convinced me to come back, and it was a fun 5 years. We'd love to have won more games, but the kids and the effort, the attitude of everybody, it was just a fantastic 5 years. Coach Kramer left then and went to become the SEC commissioner, if you remember, going into my 5th year. But we loved Rice and had 2 fantastic years there. But Coach convinced me to come back and haven't regretted it in any way.
Well, when you came back in the winter of '85 going into '86, it really was a homecoming. You had, and I'm not trying to skip over your playing career, which was outstanding, but then unfortunately I know you hurt your shoulder. But 15 years or so later, not quite 15 years, you come back to the university, and now you're the head coach. And I do remember it being a celebration, a homecoming of sort for you from time to time. And it must have been a really a warm embrace, a warm feeling for you and the family to come back to Nashville at that time.
Yeah, it really was. And we had been in Nashville quite a bit up to that point. I mean, we'd only been away from Nashville, maybe a year or two, and then we'd come back as an offensive coordinator, and then maybe a year or two, and I think it was 3 years, and came back as the head coach. So we were always around Nashville. My wife's from Lebanon, which is right outside Nashville, and it was a homecoming. It's a hard thing to do, Bernard. We were talking on the air this week about Harbaugh at Michigan, and one of the things that I said is everything gets magnified when you're an alum. You care so much for the place. Wins become unbelievably exciting times. Losses kill you. It's just really hard because the place just means more than the other places you've been. And I love the other places too, but it's just different when you come back as an alum, and it's just, you know, you're black and gold. That's what you are. You're black and gold. You always are black and gold. We all are black and gold. And we've all had good times and we've had tough times, but that's part of it. That's the great thing about going to college. And what you learn when you're there, we all apply to this day. I promise you, there's things when you have a problem, there's things you can think back that you learned when you were in high school playing football, or even college playing football, and relate it back to the Vanderbilt times. So it was joyous times. Loved the time there. And like I say, loved to have won more games, but at the same time, what a blessing. I can honestly say that the 5 teams we had, and you were on a bunch of them, my time there, the kids busted their fannies. They played their hearts out. They played with a lot of pride, and you know, it's just a class bunch of guys.
Coach, when you left Cincinnati, did most of your staff come with you to Rice? Coach, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, most of them came with me to Vanderbilt.
I'm sorry, guys. We've got low Wi-Fi.
A whole bunch traveled with me. Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
You got me?
Mm-hmm.
You got me?
I'm here. I'm sorry we're having some low connections tonight, but that's okay. We're pushing forward.
Bernard, you got
absolutely. Coach, when you came in, I do. Do you hear me okay?
All right, you got me?
I'm sorry for the low Wi-Fi, Coach. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got you.
It's, for whatever reason, the internet is just
you asked me, Bernard, about coaches. Yeah.
Did your staff follow you from Rice to Vanderbilt, sir?
Yes, pretty much that staff that was with me at Cincinnati went on to Rice with me, and most of them came on to Vanderbilt with me. Gary Shepard, Dick Hopkins, Bill Smits, Rick Christoffel, Greg Mantooth, gosh, Van Holloway. I can't even get to everybody. And Mike Nolan was on the staff with us at Rice, and Mike ended up, of course, being the head coach of the 49ers. I think he's the coordinator of the Cowboys again now. He came to Vanderbilt with us, but left before the season started, and left and went to LSU. And so he was the only one I can remember that didn't stay with us in those early years. Great guys, really good football coaches. Mark Bradley was on there. George Warhop was graduate assistant for us, Bernard, at Cincinnati. And he was coaching, I can't remember where. I ended up hiring him in the latter years back to Vanderbilt. He was our offensive line coach maybe the last 3 years maybe of our time there.
Well, the first couple of years, I know you were a little bit behind the 8 ball with recruiting season or recruiting years, because you came in late that first year. That was my class. We had a pretty small class, and then you weren't able to really fill out an entire recruiting year, I think, until about the 3rd year, just because of how many scholarships, I think, that, you know, doing the math. And what was your thoughts, Coach? These weren't all your players until the last couple of years. How do you come in and you put your system into place, but they're not the type of athletes that you may have recruited? How does a coach do that?
It's very hard, and I've probably made mistakes with that. I look back at Vanderbilt in the first couple of years. I tried to do more of the stuff that we did, and if I look back in those first couple of years, the different quarterbacks that we did have, maybe I would have done different. Now, when we got Eric Jones, at that point, he could run the true style that I like to run, and that I did with Whit Taylor and Norman Jordan and those guys. So at that point, we got to do that. In my latter years, we had Marcus Wilson. We had some fantastic quarterbacks, Bernard. You one of them. John Gromos. Mark Ratcher, Tim Richardson. I told you earlier, I thought Tim was going to be a really good player. A lot of injuries he had. He had shoulders and knees, I think. And we had a lot of good quarterbacks. Marcus Wilson was the last one, a very good player for 1 year for me, and then a good player after I left. But if I look back, I think maybe in those early years, making the Mark Ratchers of the world try to run more of the stuff that we wanted to do. If I had it to do over, I would probably do a little different stuff till we got to the quarterback that could run what we do.
And also in Marcus Wilson's recruiting class was one donut, Mike Healy, who's now a physician in Charleston. Mike and Marcus was 2 years behind me. Remember Mike out of Cincinnati?
Yes. Mike's from Cincinnati, and Mike was a good player. He played a lot for us. And won us some big games. And Mike, I remember talking about wanting to be a doctor. I'm glad to know that that's what's happened with him. And please tell Mike, I have not seen Mike. I've talked to Eric. I've seen John. I've seen Tim, of course, around. And I've seen Mark Ratcher. He worked with the FCA for a while and still is, I think. But I have not seen Mike, so make sure you tell him I said hi.
He pops in here from time to time, so hopefully he'll hear this. But Coach, I want to take you to a couple of specific games, and I hope they're in your memory because they certainly, at least this is during my years. I played 86, 87, 88, 89. And one of the funniest memories I have was a game at home against Maryland. And I hope our connection is still good because I want to tell this story. But the quarterback for Maryland threw an out route pass out of bounds, and I just happened to catch it. No big deal. He just overthrew it. Well, Coach, they ran the same play, and I hope you remember this, and the ball's coming right back at me. He overthrew it again, and right before I go to catch it, you actually dove right in front of me and intercepted the pass, spiked it, and gave me a big high five on the sidelines. And there's video of this, so I don't know if you remember this, but I certainly will never forget it.
I do remember it. I don't know how I caught the ball. It could have thrown it 10 times. I would have dropped it 9 of them, but I did catch it. I do remember high-fiving you. That is a great story. And I remember that they ran that on the news in Nashville, I think, that night after the game or the next day or whatever. I didn't know it was videoed, and they had the whole piece. In today's world, that would have made ESPN. Here's a coach diving for a ball on the sideline.
Certainly would have.
I was a tad younger in those days, Bernard, to say the least.
Rudy Kalis he found me after the game or the next, I can't remember when, but asked me about that, what happened. And I said, you got to talk to Coach. I have no idea why he did that, but it's just something I'll always remember. And I'm going to find the film and I'll share it and I'll send it to you, Coach, when I can find
gracious.
it.
I don't know if I want to see that again. That was kind of embarrassing, to tell you the truth. What's the head coach of Vanderbilt doing diving for a ball? But
just having fun.
I was 34, 35 years old, so I was a wee bit younger than I was than I am today, to say the least, at 70.
Well, Coach, I want to take you to another game that's much more serious, and it's the game we all remember in the fall of '89 at Ole Miss. It's the Chucky Mullins game, and it's been written about. There's been documentaries about it, but I've never had a chance to ask you about it. And if you're okay with talking about it, I want you to share some of your experience from that day and beyond.
Oh, I can remember it like it was yesterday. Brad Gaines went up for a ball. It was one of the 4 vertical passes that we all still run the pattern today. And Chucky Mullins was playing safety, and we were throwing to Brad down the left seam. And it was right around the hash mark. Brad goes up for the ball, and I think John was the quarterback, Gromos, I think.
It was Groms. It was.
And Brad turned sideways, Bernard, and caught the ball Chucky caught him right in the small of the back, and then the ball came out late when they hit the ground. And I knew on contact. It's amazing how you know those things. I knew he was in trouble, and just laid there for a long, long time. Billy Brewer was the head coach, a good friend. And I remember walking out to the field, and you just knew. I walked out to where he was, not right away, but later on. And beautiful day, homecoming, great game. I mean, it's just great kid, a fantastic kid. And I remember Chucky wasn't highly recruited. He's from Alabama. And we looked at him ourselves. And it really ate Brad up, Bernard. It was hard on him, really hard on Brad. And it's one of those times where I've looked back and I said to myself, I don't know what, I never felt like I gave him enough. I don't know what else I could have done. And I still talk to Brad. And when I do, we talk about it immediately. And Brad, till this day, still does certain things and goes to the grave, and was with him through everything, from being paralyzed through his death, and still today goes to see him when he can, and still has a major effect on Brad Gaines today, Bernard. It's just such a sad deal, and it's probably there's been quite a few of those type things, we all know, but that one, being part of it, being in the SEC, and dying pretty quickly. He passed away pretty quick. It's probably a year, maybe two, if I can remember right. I remember Chucky passed away when I was the offensive coordinator at Mississippi State. But just a sad day. Class young man. Ole Miss was classy with it. Brad has been unbelievably classy with it through all these years. And very proud of Brad. Very proud of Brad. It really affected Brad's football, everything. It really, really got to him. And but just very proud of everybody that was involved with that. It's one of those classy stories that happens when there's, even with somebody passing away. It just the class that everybody showed through all of that, especially Chucky.
Well, Coach, I know that Brad has struggled with it over the years. He's lived with it. It's a very heavy burden for him. I haven't spoken to Brad about this. Haven't spoken to him, I think, maybe since college. But from what I've read in the documentaries and our mutual friends, because he and I were in the same recruiting class, I certainly hope he's come to peace with it, or comes to peace with it. But that play was on a third down, and that year I held for extra points and field goals. And we just went out on the field not knowing at the time that there was an issue with him. And then, within about 15 or 20 seconds, you realize he's not getting up. And we didn't know if we were supposed to come back to the sidelines. We stayed huddled up for a few minutes. But it was one of the most surreal experiences that I've ever been affiliated with from sports, because eventually the ambulance had to come on the field. They stopped the game for about 45 minutes. And from that point forward, it just was a weird experience. It was a weird rest of the game, because both sides of the ball, of the field, I'm sure that's all people were really thinking about, was how he was doing. But I've never asked you about that, but I just wanted to hear what your experience was like.
Well, and one more thing, that you all went out for the field goal, and at that point they thought it was a completed pass. Mm-hmm. They ended up calling it an incomplete pass late after everything was said and done. And it was a great game. It was a close game. We had every opportunity to win it. We ended up getting beat late in the game, if you remember. But honestly, you walked off the field, and that wasn't what was on anybody's mind at all. And I'm very proud of Brad. You got to be a strong and a good person for it to affect you like that. I mean, Brad took it personal, had nothing to do with a hit. I mean, he got hit. He did not hit Chucky. He got hit. He was in midair. But Brad has just been unbelievable through all of this. Yes, he does still struggle with this. You talk to him today, and you being a teammate of his, I promise you it would come up very quickly with him. he still does struggle with it.
Well, Coach, I want to leave that topic and talk a little bit more about your career as we get closer toward the end of our call here. I want to welcome O.J. Fleming. I want to welcome Joe Peoples. Had some other folks roll in the last couple of minutes. Good to see you guys. I'm glad you're with us for a couple of minutes here. Coach, at the end of your tenure at Vanderbilt, you moved on to your next coaching stint, and I want to talk about you going to UAB in '95. I think it was '95, may have been your first year at UAB, and then you stayed through the transition to Conference USA. So tell us about UAB.
Great 13 years. Basically started football there. I could tell stories forever about different things that happened. We had no locker rooms. Our players in the first year dressed in shifts in a little old intramural locker room, and went to practice, came back and dressed in shifts after practice again. It's just an unbelievable story, and very proud, Bernard, of the Birmingham time. We love Birmingham. I raised both children in Birmingham. My daughter went as a junior in high school. My son got to stay pretty much all the way through. I think he was in the second, third grade when we went. And that program made it all the way to the, I think, 24th, 23rd in the country before we left. And just very proud there. A lot of players, Bernard, came there. Just, they wanted the challenge. I mean, we beat good teams on players, and we had nothing. We had no locker rooms, no practice fields at the time. I mean, it was a really hard to start till we got a few things going. And a bunch of Alabama kids stayed in the state and played for us. Just fantastic memories through all of that. And we had to play unbelievable schedules, Bernard, because we had no money. And so we would travel to all of these big schools for the money. And so it was unbelievably tough schedules through the years. Then we got into Conference USA, finished second the first year we're in it, stayed up in the upper echelon most of the time that we were there, never won one. Came very close at Southern Miss once, but never won the championship, but had a lot of really good teams and a lot of major upsets there.
Well, speaking of that, where does that LSU win in 2000 fit in your memory bank of wins and memorable games?
Oh, it would be right there with quite a few, but yes. I mean, I used to say when Nick Saban first came to Alabama, I was still at UAB. We'd say, well, we're the only ones in the state that's ever beat him. And because I think when he was at LSU, Alabama hadn't beaten him yet at that point. I'm not sure, but we always loved to say that. Nick was the head coach at LSU at that point. And it was a great night. Our team couldn't have played any better, and we picked their quarterback off 5 times. So it fell in our lap that night. They didn't play very well, and that's what has to happen in some of those kind of games to win them.
Y'all get on YouTube and go find that 2000 UAB LSU 13-10 game. That's an exciting game to watch. Coach, you had a player who went on to the pros, who's from my hometown, my high school, and played fairly well for you and in the pros, Izell Reese, early in the UAB years.
Izell's one of those another great kid. Got everything he had, good player, good talent. Went on and played with the Cowboys and different people. And I've not talked to Izell in recent years, but I know he's done very well, and he's still around Birmingham. And Izell was one of those kids that, man, he jumped on it quick. I mean, he was just a good player right out the gate, and is very smart. One of the smarter secondary kids that I've coached in my time. Great knacks toward the ball, had a great feel for the game. Yes, had a very good pro career and has been successful ever since. And another class act. It's just unbelievable, Bernard, the different kids that I've, just been lucky enough to get to coach. I mean, just leave great memories for me.
Well, Coach, I think that most players would say universally it was their pleasure as well to be able to play for you and your staff. But speaking of former players, Brian Donnelly has just joined us, and Kenny Cole has also joined us. Excuse me. So welcome, fellas. Thank you for stopping by. We're taking some trips down memory lane with Coach Watson Brown, and we're getting close toward the end of our discussion. And I sure appreciate you spending some time with us tonight, Coach.
Oh, thank you.
Coach, you left UAB in 06, but then you head to Tennessee Tech, and that's where you finished your career. What was going through your thought process about coming to Tennessee Tech? And I know you had some up and down years. You had some very good years. You had some lesser years at Tennessee Tech, but that's where you wound up your career. So talk to us about, I don't know if you want to call it coming home, but I know Tennessee Tech is not too far from where you live. So talk to us about that thoughts.
Well, they were talking about doing away with football at UAB, and it had really gotten tough, Bernard, and they end up doing away with it a couple of years after I left, 3 or 4 years after I left. And it was a hard fight, and proud that it's back and doing well now. Opportunity came about. I was the AD and the coach at UAB, so there was a lot on me, and just came back home and decided to coach here. And I remember telling the athletic director when I said I'm going to do this, I said, been doing this a long time, had some really good teams. I've never won a championship. And they hadn't won one here at that point in, I think, 33 years or something like that. And I think in our 4th season, we won the OVC championship, and that was a great thrill. Another great bunch of kids, a bunch of older kids that came in as freshmen and just grew and became where they just couldn't be beat. I mean, they were tough nuts, found a way to win. And when I got out, I really thought we were good enough to do it again, but I just decided it was time to move on. I thought I had one more good championship team there. And the quarterback on that team, Bernard, it's talking about coaching players I've coached. The quarterback on that team was named Brock McCoy. He's from Livingston, Tennessee, close to Cookville. His daddy, Danny, was my quarterback at Cincinnati. So it's amazing how many different kids of guys I'd coached earlier years that I ended up coaching their sons in latter years. And Brock was a good player.
You took you really answered one of my final questions. How many father-son tandems have you been fortunate enough to coach over the years? Are there any others besides them?
Gosh, I can't even think of it. That's hard on me. But I mean, Jeff Madden's son I coached, Alama Matthews' son I coached. There's been more. I can't think of all of them right now. I'm going to say 6 or 7.
If there's ever a Watson Brown roast,
mine don't work as good as it used to. Huh?
Coach, if there's ever a Watson Brown evening for a roast, the father-son duos have got to be part of that dais.
I don't know that I'd want them there to roast me. That's a double team, boy.
That's right.
That might get really rough.
Well, Coach, we got a question from Dwayne. He says, what do you miss the most about coaching?
2 things. Number one, the players, the player coaching relationships that are day to day. I miss that. I dearly miss that. I miss the X's and O's and the competitiveness of preparing for a game. I don't miss a lot of the extra stuff. I don't miss the recruiting. I don't miss all the engagements that you have to go to and do those things. I think it's the day-to-day with the players and the coaches, the competitiveness of getting ready for a game, starting as soon as the last game was over and into winter workouts. All of that was fun to me. And it's fun now, Bernard, to like this. and to be able to talk to different guys, like I said, 3,500, 4,000 kids. That was as a head coach, not even in the assistant years. And now it's a lot of fun to be able to talk to the different guys. Like I say, I'm not Facebook and Twitter. If I was, I'm sure I'd get more. But that's just not me. But it's just fun to, one will text me or pick up the phone and call, or I'll find one. And everybody's doing great. It's just been so many successful stories that it's just unbelievable.
Well, that's such a legacy, that many players over your career. What a tribute. But I do have to ask you, I've always wondered, were you fully aware of some of the crazy antics that Coach Brad Bates had us doing in the off season? Were you aware of some of these just, and I've looked back now, and now it's funny. Back then it was kind of cruel, but pushing cars up the parking deck next to Memorial Gymnasium when it's snowing outside, and he or Dwayne or somebody is sitting in the driver's seat with their foot on the brake or pulling the parking brake and having competition. I mean, he just always made it so interesting. You never knew what you were going to be working out and doing next. Were the coaches aware of all that?
No, but yes, sometimes we didn't want to be aware. There were some things that I'd hear we're going to do. I'd just kind of put my hand over my eyes and say, "Oh Lord, hope somebody don't get hurt." But think back about that, and have Brad Bates, John Norwig. John's been with the Pittsburgh Steelers ever since, I guess, I left. When I left, I think John went to Pittsburgh. He's been with the Steelers all these years. Brad Bates, very successful athletic director. We had some good folks around us, and that Coach Kramer had hired, Bernard, that made it nice for all of us. We've all got fond memories. Brad was off the wall. I will say that now. I'd had Jeff Madden as my strength coach at Rice, and he ended up staying at Rice, ended up working for my brother at Texas for a lot of years after that. But Brad was as different as any strength coach I've ever been around. And I look back on it, and I see now in today's world, you hear of strength coaches doing some of these things. But back in those days, it was very unique, some of the things he had you guys do.
He was unique, and he made it interesting, even for those of us who didn't like to lift weights. He made it interesting for everybody. I got two more questions, Coach. Kenny Cole wants to know, what are your memories about Tom am I saying it right? Galberts? I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name. Galbeirz. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, Tommy Galberts, yes. Wow, man. One of the tougher guys I've ever been around. He was one of those just never back down to anything kind of guys. And ask him what I call him Tommy through the years, but ask him what he's doing now. Where is Tom?
Kenny, if you know, throw it in the comments.
Know?
Speaking of record-setting quarterbacks, Kurt Page has just joined us. So thank you, Kurt, for stopping by for a couple minutes with Coach Brown. Glad to see that you're with us. Coach, as we get toward the end, and I really appreciate your time and this stroll down memory lane and figuring out the technology part of it. And I really appreciate you sharing some of your memories about things. But here's what I want to leave you with is, and I'm going to give you the final word about this. The coaching has had to change over the decades because the athletes have changed, the sport has changed. And it seems like the longer you're in the position of being, whether it's an offensive coordinator or head coach, you've got to evolve with the times, because what was working back then may not be working now because the athletes are just different. How did you adapt? How did your staff figure out how to adapt and evolve to be able to coach as long as you did? Because if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have been coaching very long.
Well, good question, Bernard. I started out as a head coach at 28, and I ended up as a head coach at 66. So there's a long time in between there. And the one thing that never changed. Kids are still, the traits of kids in the early years are the traits of the kids today. They want to win. They want to be successful, learn. They give you everything that they got. The kids in the world today, what they dealt with that you guys didn't deal with, I didn't deal with as a player, is social media. It's a different world. You got so many different people pulling at you now in so many different directions. I think it makes it easier for them to be a little more in an individualist type way. I won't say selfish, but they're a little bit more of individuals. I think as I was coming up, whatever was said, you did. In today's world, sometimes now they want to know why and why am I not playing more? And I think a lot of that is just the world around them. There's so many people telling them how good they are and they should be doing this and they should be doing that. It's just things they have dealt with that we didn't deal with. A lot of the off-field things, the different drugs that have come through that really weren't around when I was playing. I know they were getting more so when you guys were playing. The different things these kids deal with now in a social way, I think makes it a lot harder on them to be disciplined, do the things they're supposed to do. But honest, it was never to me any different at 66 than it was 28. These kids are kids. And I always said, if they trust you and they respect you, they're going to play hard for you. And you had to gain their trust, and trust meaning that you cared about them. It wasn't just about the team. You cared about them. And then respect that they felt like you knew what you were doing and you were doing the right things and that. And I always felt like if you had those two pieces with a young man, you could get to him, you could help him, you could get him through different things that he needed. Those are a lot of the memories I have. I can remember so many kids that had major issues that would come in, and I would do everything I could to help them. We talked about Brad earlier. Brad was one of those that I had an empty piece. I didn't know what else to do. And, but yes, I don't think kids are that different. I do think the kids in the world today deal with a lot more things than we did.
It's a lot of instant gratification for a lot of these kids because of social media. But I think the one component that you just said, it comes from the leadership of being a coach and gaining the trust and the mutual respect between the athlete and the coach. It doesn't matter what decade, it doesn't matter what generation you're in, that always has to be there, or you're not going to have players to play for you. I think sorry, we're in the low.
Bernard, if they don't trust you and they don't respect you, then it's not going to fly. And
Coach,
and I'm not just talking about being a good player. I'm talking about, I'm talking about being becoming good people. Yeah, you got me? You there?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Bernard.
I'm here, Coach. I heard every word.
Hey, there you are. Lost you again.
I'm here, Coach.
Okay.
Okay.
But that's the
I
key
heard
to
every
me.
word you said, so thank you. But Coach, I want to thank you for your time. And, well, that's what
Good.
I was going to say. That's what's allowed you to be a coach for as long as you did and coaching as many kids as you did.
Well, great coaches, great players, made it fun all the way through, from secretaries like Beverly and JJ, different ones I've had at different schools, great managers, helpers. Dwayne Jones, I told you, is one of my favorites of all time. And just great players and coaches. It was easy. It's been a blast. I've never worked a day in my life, and good Lord's been good to me.
Well, Coach, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while, and this was a highlight for me, so thank you.
Glad to do it. Let me know. Love to do it again.
Absolutely. Guys, this will conclude us another night with Conversations with Commodores with Coach Watson Brown. Every Thursday night, we try to bring a new conversation. We got Edie, Johnston, Kelsey. Then we've got Miss Jakes. June Jakes will be with us in 2 weeks, and hopefully our internet will be better for both of those discussions. Y'all be safe, be patient, do the right thing. This pandemic is not going to last forever, but we still got to be patient. Y'all take care and anchor down.